Hey guys, thanks for joining Harbourtime Podcast. I've got an exciting guest today, but before we get there, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, share the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, you can do that on whatever network you're listening to, whatever channel you're listening to. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel. We'll be updating regular, working on some additional content. But today, we're going to be covering a topic that is kind of still fresh on my mind. It's been around for several years. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. We were actually just talking about how to pronounce his name because I've heard it pronounced so many different ways. And I know I'm probably going to say it wrong. But I've got with me today Matt Slonaker of M. Allen LLC. And we will talk about that in a minute. I've known Matt, or I've met with Matt a couple of times in the past. And actually, Matt, we met in, I think it was March of 2020. So 3 years ago. It was right at the beginning of COVID. I was looking for a job and a call got set up with Matt. Matt was at a different company at the time. And he said, you know what I would do, Colin, if I was you? I would really focus on branding yourself and posting a lot of content and doing updates. And essentially what he said was the genesis of me podcasting, of my business. And so thank you, Matt, for that. Thank you. I don't know. It's 3 years later.
Wow.
And things are still things are still blowing and going. So Matt, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for a second before we jump into the topic, which I'll introduce?
Yes. Thanks, Colin, and appreciate you sharing that. Didn't know that, but appreciate that. So Matt Slonaker, in 30 years in this financial service industry, I think the way I kind of describe my career in the 3 decades is a third in the business, the operations, namely default and real estate owned. I was at Bear Stearns, for example, at the last crisis. 14,000 REO assets nationwide, and also started a field loss mitigation group knocking on homes in Southern California. So operational expertise there, a third in business information, business intelligence, running teams with analytics, predictive modeling in mind, and then the last third running sales and marketing teams and running my consultancy since 2020. Can't believe it's been 3 years now. So like you, Colin, more of the entrepreneurial path the last 3 years, and the opportunity to represent at any given time. I've worked with 20 different companies. So it's amazing when you look back, the things you can do. You don't feel like it at the present time sometimes, but when you look back, you're like, wow, I did that. So I have to thank all my clients.
Yeah, that's amazing when you think about the number of clients, the number of people that you work with, and you don't think about it at the time. But I should have done this up front. Let me go ahead and
Yeah.
mention what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about becoming a thought leader and taking a couple of different angles with that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about consulting with C-level to maximize revenue. And we're going to hopefully have a little bit of time to get into artificial intelligence, or AI, and how you could potentially use it as a solopreneur, as a consultant. Maybe you're an individual consultant. You can also use it in business too. But Matt and I both have our own consulting businesses, right? And so we're going to talk about it from that context. And like Matt said, he's got a consultancy he's developed. I've always considered Matt, well, from the time I've known him is about 5 or 6 years. Let's put it that way. And then the last 3 years, I watch his content. I read his content. I pay attention to it because I've considered Matt for this time as a thought leader, as a leader and a thought leader in enterprise sales, and all that includes so technology, fintech, finance, motivation, the profession itself of leading and sales. So we're going to talk about that. And he mentioned it. He's been in the mortgage industry. I've been in the mortgage industry, so the servicing industry. And when he talks about the crisis at Bear Stearns, everybody needs to remember what that was like, 15 years ago, 14 years ago. How does one become a thought leader? I think it's easier today, more so than ever. I think it's easier to become a thought leader. Now you have to convince others that you're a thought leader. You have to provide information that others want to hear. But let's talk a little bit about, how did you find your niche, Matt, as you're developing M. Allen and as you're consulting and working with other companies, how do you find your niche and build your brand and begin to create content and those types of things?
Yeah, I think, Colin, I think first and foremost, right, many of us that have that label, thought leader, it's probably not something we incline on, to give ourselves. It's usually from colleagues, people like yourself. So I appreciate you saying that. I think looking back, what's helped build the brand and then launch M. Allen and my network, it really, I have to say, probably started with LinkedIn when it really, if I go back, it was probably almost 10 years ago when LinkedIn was just coming out. And I think many of us in business to business, I just started reaching out because I've been at a lot of different companies. So there's good and bad, right? I think one of the good about moving, and not all of my moving around in jobs was my own choice, right? Some of the companies were having problems and I had to get out. But some of it was following mentors, people like John Vella, who I'll call out here. John's been a mentor of mine. I've worked over 20 years with him. So, when John got a new opportunity, I kind of followed him, right? But I think reaching out, using LinkedIn, the first thing was kind of reaching out and connecting with former colleagues, started building the connections. And at that time, it wasn't really follow me as a thought leader. It was more if you had to know the people and connect with them. I think just staying persistent. Every day I had a target of like how many colleagues I wanted to connect with. So I think fast forward to today, I think that's one of the things you have to do is use LinkedIn and start with your own personal network, the colleagues that actually know you. And then as you do that, then start reaching out to prospects, target companies, target clients, and just every day, get in the habit of doing that. I think as you build your network, the other key thing is, and Colin, you probably see this too, is there's people out there that are in these roles. They can influence a lot of people. Unfortunately, they're not comfortable and they don't post, they don't share, they don't comment, they don't like, right? So it's almost like, why are you on? I get it. It's probably like a mailing address, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you need an address for any given time. But I think you have to get in the habit of, and you'll see different people say, hey, every day, every 3 days out of the week, find your own cadence, find something you're comfortable with, but share or reshare. And there's nothing wrong with resharing, right? Like you and I both do it. So if you see something that is a really thought-provoking piece, share that with your network, maybe give your own commentary on it. But I think the content is key. And it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be, you see people do their images. I do that sometimes. But you know what? The key is that you're putting it out there. And again, try that as your commentary. I think the third piece, the kind of building your brand online, is having others talk about you or recommend you. So you see companies do this a lot. It's always better when somebody else can talk about you, right, versus yourself. So having the referrals, the customer testaments, I always tell clients I work with, like, hey, look, the operators hear this stuff before sales and marketing do. So, package that stuff every day and copy us. Let us then repackage it. And, we can keep it blind, but just mention, hey, it's a chief revenue officer at XYZ company, or not mention the company and just say, hey, they're a top 20 lender, whatever it may be. I think that's another key thing you have to do, because to your point, if you want to start getting recognized as a thought leader, it really needs to come from other people. Again, it can't be yourself touting your chest and saying, hey, I'm an expert. I hate the term expert, because I think in my case, I've done so many different things. I have to keep learning, and I'm a student of the game. So like sales, by all means, I think I know a lot, but I still learn every day from other thought leaders out there, former colleagues. I'll call out an individual, Sean Burke. We worked at SBI together a couple of years ago. Sean does a great job. So, I think I'll pause there, let you add other commentary or questions in, but hopefully I'm answering your question there, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great, and it's key because the first thing you started with is, yeah, you're not going around saying I'm a thought leader. You're right. I have given you that title, right? Absolutely. But I think that goes with the territory is that people will begin to notice notice someone if they're posting, right? So if I'm whether I'm 51 years old like me, and a lot of my focus right now is on people who are over 50 and who want to be a solopreneur or who are looking for a new profession. And so really thinking about ways that quite frankly people can continue their careers till retirement, right? But part of that is developing a niche, and what a lot of that will come naturally over time. If you've been in the mortgage servicing industry, then your niche is going to be something related to mortgage servicing more than likely. Or if you're a sales leader in the mortgage servicing industry, that's going to be a part of your niche and your thought leadership. But absolutely, I think a lot of people are either just on LinkedIn as their address, or just to read other people's stuff, or maybe they just feel like they had to be on LinkedIn. But if you want to develop yourself and create um, this image of yourself, or if you're trying to get somebody to hire you or to hire you as a client or hire you as an employee, you need to display some knowledge, right? And so naturally over time, this thought leadership will display. And you're right. It doesn't have to be I studied a lot about what to post on LinkedIn, and it changes over time. But one of the things that never changes is you got to be consistent. You mentioned, Matt, your own cadence. I don't know what your cadence is. I know that it shows up in my feed every now and then, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes it's you going to visit a client or
yeah,
you're headed to the airport, right?
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it's the hey, it's the weekend and I'm having a cup of coffee. It's been a great week, or it's been a tough week, whatever the case may be. And then there's motivation built into there. So you've got to have this cadence because then the algorithm takes over, right? The LinkedIn algorithm or Twitter, if you're on it, or whatever the case may be. So I agree with what you're saying. And I'd say part of the outline I'm looking at here, valuable content. Valuable content is in the eye of the beholder, right? Some people may read something that you post and think, whatever, useless, worthless. But 10 people may read it and it may impact them right then.
So, Colin, on that point, real quick, I want to make a point that because you could probably affirm this. Over my career on LinkedIn, when I make some of the best thought provoking, intellect, technical posts, I do get, let's say on average over the last couple of years, I'm probably averaging maybe say 600 to 1,000 views. But the ones that get the most views, the most engagement, people commenting and so forth, it's usually the ones that are personal in nature, where I'm showing a picture of my daughter and I'm talking about the time with my daughter and being a parent. Those are the ones that really, 5,000 views, 46, you know. So I don't know. Are you seeing something similar on yours, technical versus the personal ones?
Yeah, I think there are people who get 150,000 views on the technical stuff. I'm generally not going to be one of those. I'm going to be more, yeah, my views pick up. And we talked about it the other day. About a month ago, I went to breakfast with a client and I posted something about just being at breakfast with a client and getting out a little bit more often. That was one of my most viewed posts, or at least in the last year, right? It was simple and it wasn't this massive detail about how you're going to become a multimillionaire and, follow these steps and this, that, and the other. It was, hey, I've personally got to get out more in front of people because I think it will help me. I've got messages, I've got breakfast lined up from that with people, lunches lined up with people from that saying, hey, you know what? We haven't connected in 2 years, in 3 years. Let's meet for lunch, right? So there are so many things that come out of these personal, I want to say heartfelt, but I don't think that's necessarily the right word, but just the more personal, intimate type post, right? And I think that's what you're getting at.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit then before we move on to the next topic too, because I think this is key. And I think post COVID, it's more key. And it kind of goes to what I was just talking about is network networking and collaboration with others. So you want to be a thought leader, or you're developing this mode as a thought leader. Let's say that, and I say you, not
Yeah.
Matt,
Yeah.
but an individual, someone, and they want to go out on their own, or maybe they've lost their job and they have to go out there on their own. How key do you still think networking and collaboration is?
I think it's really key. I think that, especially in the case of a solo entrepreneur, yourself, being a consultant, whatever, sales, representing clients. I have a client that I'm representing. I think the network is so key. There's a saying about relationships are everything, and it's so true. So, there's degree of relationships, right? There's friends, and I'd use that term friends, meaning people that are there, they're thinking about you when you're going through a hardship and they're reaching out to you. And then there's the colleagues, right? So there's different levels of your network, but the in-person piece, so conferences are great for that. And I see a lot of industry conferences. I see a lot of our colleagues that will attend those. I think that's very impactful. I think the other thing that I prefer to do, and you see me doing lately, is scheduling a number of visits with people in towns where there's a lot of industry executives, colleagues. Right. And so I prefer to do it that way because typically I know I'm getting more of their time than if at a conference, and it's the speed dating type of routine, unless you can get them out for a dinner. So I prefer to do more of like visits in a town. But to your point, network is key, and nurture network. And there's a saying out there about give and takers. And I think this is something that's so key for us, that you're trying to, build your business, build a client's business. I think you have to really give, and every day do that give inventory. Who did I give to today versus take? And it's hard. It's a balancing act because, again, there's a saying too of playing the long game. So you may be giving thought research, you may be giving perspective, you may be giving a referral to help them build their business, but you got to play the long game with them, because people, I think, generally do remember who's there to help them in their time of need. So I think that what I would say about networking at the end of the day is don't just look at it from a take. Make sure that you're giving, and candidly, you're probably giving more than what you're taking from it.
Yeah, no doubt. I had a friend actually on the podcast a couple of weeks ago who's in a job search situation, and that was one of his areas of focus, was giving to others, posting jobs to his network that probably aren't for him, but that may be for everybody else. The next topic is consulting with C-level to maximize revenue. And the reason I put this in here, the reason I want to talk about this, is because if someone is interested in becoming a solopreneur and doing work for others, or a contract worker, or almost anything, you're going to have to figure out how to talk to C-level people, how to target C-level people, because generally speaking, they're going to be the ones making the decision on hiring you, particularly if you're a consultant or a solopreneur. I don't know how else to put it other than generally the frontline people aren't going to be the ones hiring you, right? It is going to be the C-level, or at least executive level, pretty high up, if not C-suite. And so you need to be thinking about, how can I target, how can I consult with, how can I work with C-level, and what's important to them, whether it's maximizing revenue, which is the topic I put here, or whether it's, increasing profits, developing out social media content, or whatever the case might be. So I want to focus on decision makers. You really need to get in with the decision makers. Sorry, I was trying to read talk at the same time. That doesn't go well. So Matt, how do you do that? What do you do? How do you focus it?
Well, I think talking about the network, I think if I look at just who I've reported into over the last 10 years, most of those individuals are today still in the C-suite. So looking at your network and looking where you have the close proximity to, it's probably easier for someone like me, right? Because you've reported into these C-level execs, or you've been a C-level exec, and so you have some context of what the issues are. I've been in the seat, so forth. That definitely helps. It's a little bit harder if you were trying to break into that, and you've been a couple layers down. So basically, there you have to do the referral play, or again, at least go up. I'm sure if you were a high valuable player in the team, and you might have been a couple levels away from a C-suite exec, they still probably know who you are, right? So just make sure that when you're kind of doing your initial contact efforts, right, that you're kind of playing up on where you worked with them, maybe what you appreciated about the C-level exec. We all like to hear compliments, right? So talk about how they impacted you. So that would be some recommendation that I would have with individuals that are maybe trying to break into the C-suite. But if you've been in the C-suite and you've worked with the C-suite, there's a level of credibility there. They understand that you've dealt with some of their challenges, but I think you still can't take that for granted, though. So the second piece of that, Colin, I would think, is make sure that you're giving before you take. I think even if you have a deep relationship, I think that's where, if you think about the C-level execs today, even though some of them have had context of the last crisis, they are facing so many challenges: remote workforce, inflation, right? Decrease profitability, squeeze on margins. There's so many different things that are challenging them. So I think you've got to put that hat on. And if you were contacted by somebody you knew, but you didn't know them that well, they're like, how would you want to be approached? And so I think that's another key thing in today, nurturing that C-suite. And I say nurturing because before you even have an ask of a meeting, try to share. And again, give versus take. So I'll pause there and let you add to it.
Yeah, no, those are all great. And it actually is running along the theme a little bit of giving, like you said, maybe putting information out there in the context of social media, so that what if they actually wanted to talk to you and decided to go to LinkedIn and look you up before to remind themselves of who you are, right? So you target someone, you tell them, hey, Matt, remember me? I used to report to Barbara, who reported to you, and we worked on this. Well, I want to do X, Y, and Z. They may delete it. They may hang up on you. They may do whatever, or they may go straight to LinkedIn, which is what I do on everything. One of my former bosses, though he was only my boss or my manager for a couple of months, it was during transition, but he said, if you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist, right? If you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist. And what he was saying, what James was saying is, I go search LinkedIn first to see who they're connected to, their history, what they're posting, et cetera, right? Do they take time to contribute? How can I find out information about this person? So not to really, I'm not getting paid to promote LinkedIn. I'm just saying it more from a context of, you've got to have information out there so that when you're targeting the C level, or the decision maker, if we want to call it that, you need to have some information available. You need to show value. You need to have them think, oh yeah, I remember Colin now. I'll meet with him, right? Or yes, this person provided me this information. They're a giver. I'll talk to them. Or when we were talking about networking earlier, oh, I've seen this person at the conference, so they must kind of be involved with stuff, right? Or else they wouldn't have been there. Or I've seen them at the regional Dallas Fort Worth meeting of blank. Fill in the meeting.
Yeah.
So it's all of these things combined that really build up to, this is how you get the meeting. And then you have to provide value, whatever their need is, identifying the need. When I first started doing this I guess 3 years ago, like I said, 3 years ago, I was just contacting anybody saying, hey, I'm a consultant now. Oh, that's great, Colin. You're a consultant. Thanks for being a consultant, right? That's essentially how some of the, well, what are you working on, Colin? And I wasn't prepared. And I was 48. I should have been a little bit smarter than that, but I just thought all I had to do was tell them I was a consultant and all this money would flow in, right? I mean, that's what consultants do. But it's not necessarily what consultants do. They provide value, they fix problems, they provide information, they help people get to where they need to go. And so I had to create that message.
I think in addition to that too, because we talked about LinkedIn as kind of your hub, the other key piece I would recommend for people is consulting and building their brand. Create a blog, a website, have another digital means that you can use to communicate with people. So what I like about digital, I use Wix as my website, my blog provider, my email provider. So I'm able to sit here, create folios, right, where you put in outside information, inside information about yourself, whatever, testaments, and then you can package that in a digital link and share it via text with graphics. And so, not everything has to be LinkedIn, but just putting that in there, Colin, I think it's key to build your digital presence outside of LinkedIn as well.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because I've talked a little bit about LinkedIn because I spend so much time on it. But I also have a blog, colinharbour.com, and I have this podcast. This is my way of creating content and showing a breadth, a width of knowledge, if you will, right, to others who may potentially hire me. It also helps me build content, right? I can break these videos down and post them, which I will do. I've now used the videos and create blog. I'll have 2 or 3 blog posts eventually out of this podcast episode. So it's about more than LinkedIn, right? And it's easier now than ever. I was not a technical person, right? I'm a client guy. I'm a glad hander. Send me to a conference. Let me take you to dinner and we'll figure something out, right? That's more what I am. But I figured it out. Let's put it that way, right? And if I can figure it out, I guarantee it, anybody out there can figure out how to create a blog, right? Artificial intelligence is not new. But since November, since Chat GPT really rolled out through the OpenAI rolled out their Chat GPT, all of a sudden artificial intelligence is everywhere, right? It's almost like it just popped in overnight. And a lot of people are scared of what it may do. It could cause people to lose their jobs. I understand that. It could cause, a lot of things I don't want to go into. I've read some of these like doomsday scenarios from AI and all that kind of stuff, which, it seems silly, but then you're like, well, maybe this could actually happen, right? But I want to talk about it in the context of a solopreneur or a consultant or any business person, and how they could use AI and how it can help you even establish and expand your desire to be a thought leader, right? Have you gotten on AI or done much with Chat GPT or any of the stuff yet?
Yes, and I think a couple of reasons why. So first, fitting with the term thought leader, but also having a consultancy, working with technical firms. Probably half of the companies I've worked with in the last 3 years have been in the fintech space. So I think it's important, if you're going to represent them and their solutions and you're out there in the marketplace talking to the C-suite, that you better have some firsthand experience seeing projects or working with the tools and the solution. So I think that's the first key piece of this. The second piece is, personally, I've used it a lot more for like research. So good example, I was interviewing for a chief revenue officer role a couple months ago. And I made it to the finalist round, and I was preparing for the onsite in Seattle. And I wanted to see here, it was with a private lender that was doing ADUs and construction lending. And my career, by all means, wasn't in the construction space. So I had to do research, right? I had to make sure I was prepped. I knew the terms. I had to think like, okay, if I was a builder, what would I look for in a lender? Vice versa. If I was a lender, what's key to a builder, right? So I used AI to really help me kind of form the basis of my research. and create kind of the one-page outlines, such as what you did for this podcast, right? Use it to create an outline and help me think about the issues and be prepared for that interview. And while I didn't get the job, at least I was told I presented very well, and they were impressed with the research. I brought in some roadmaps and things, visuals that most of the candidates wouldn't even think about doing at the time. So that's how I've used it, and to this day, I use it as I'm kind of prospecting into strategic accounts. Yes, I could go on their website, I could get the earnings and so forth, but by using chat and the AI functionality, it really brings it to you. It will leverage those external resources and it gives it to you more in one place. And then by all means, you still have to dive into, it's not at the point yet where I would completely trust it. So that's why you still have to complement it, right, with your own research. And, the best research to me is, call people inside these accounts, bounce, leverage. And what I would say, Colin, is people are impressed that, they can tell if you've put in the time and do the research. And so I think that's how I'm leveraging it right now, is helping me do the research, inform, kind of an outline. And then from there, I will complement the outline with traditional ways of research.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, on all the research, or so I've been really into artificial intelligence, as a lot of people have, since November. But even prior to that, I use, and I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, a company called lately.ai. And this is 3 years ago I started using them, or 2 years ago. And it is a platform that you can take a video or a blog or anything and you upload it, and then it uses AI to break down the video, create social media posts, suggest times that you should post them. All of this is done through AI. So my friends at Lately have been on top. I always kind of joke around that Lately was AI before AI was cool. And again, I know AI has been around a long time, but since the chat GPT stuff has come up and now so many people use it, people are looking into, how do you automate repetitive tasks? How do you analyze data to inform the decision making? I don't want AI to make the decisions for me, but if I have a large set of data, and this was my previous podcast guest Pusanjit Bhattacharya, he said, look, have AI analyze the data for you and provide some information. You're not asking it to make the decision. We're talking about it in the context of marketing decisions. Look for even micro trends that you may not be able to find, and then you can determine what you want to do with this analysis, right?
Yes.
You mentioned it, podcast outline. This I've done. So I took a break from about a year from Harbourtime, and in the first season, I'm calling it, first 30 or so episodes, it was just hard to find guests, and it's hard to create podcast outlines. Now it's still hard to find guests, not hard to find guests, but to get them scheduled, to get the right day, to get the right topics. But it is simple to come up with an outline, because I say, Chat GPT, here's what I want this 30 to 40 minute podcast to be about. Can you provide me an outline? Boom, boom, boom. Then, like what we did, is I send it to you. We kind of do some back and forth. We redline it. We say, hey, let's take this angle here, this angle here, this angle here. And we've got it. And it just makes the process simpler. So what I've been encouraging people is use artificial intelligence to make your life simpler. I know it's scary. I know it may replace jobs. I don't want it to replace jobs. I don't want it to do these things, but I think it's inevitable. So then the next step is, how can I use it to improve my life? If I want to go into business for myself and be a solopreneur, how can I use Chat GPT or other forms of artificial intelligence to help me research an industry? Or if I'm in a job interview situation, research an industry. I've used it to write cold emails for me, right? Write a cold email targeting this type of person about this subject, and I've pulled it off. I've had it write poems for me. I've had chat. As a matter of fact, a couple months ago, I was on Chat GPT and I kept going through stuff, and it finally came back and it said, "Look, you've been on Chat GPT too long. You need to sign off and come back later." I'm not kidding. I seriously got that message from OpenAI at one point.
Oh, wow.
Like, I was like, okay, well, I obviously need to go check on my kids or something to see what's going on. But
Interesting.
you're right. If you're trying to create a subject matter experience or expertise, if you're trying to learn about something, the research is there. Just ask it the questions, right? It's not perfect. I like what you said. I don't completely trust it, right? Maybe it's because we don't completely trust anybody, right?
Well, I think you also have to bring it in your tense, your voice. At the end of the day, when you're speaking, writing, whatever communication method, you want it to be genuine. And again, you want to have your perspective, your point of view on it. So again, it gets you maybe 60 to 70% of the way there sometimes. But you still, in my view, you have to be genuine. You have to add your perspective and point of view to it. And again, just know that you're looking 360, right? It's kind of like when you're coming into a new organization, consultant or executive, you do the one-on-ones with key people. I listen to what they say. I take notes. I will always have a question like, who or what should I be aware of, blah, blah, blah. But by all means, I'm not going to just take that person's view and run with it as the gospel. I'm going to, give everybody a fair shot for that initial 60, 90 days, make my own observations and determinations. And I think that's the way you have to look at AI.
Yeah, I love that. And you said 60, 70%. I doubt we know exactly for sure yet, but you're right. Your own voice has to come through. I'm not using now. I do have a post that I'm going to be doing on LinkedIn this week, I think. And I've actually said it at the end of the post. I said, artificial chat GPT produced 100% of this post. And I'm doing it for it kind of goes along with the video, right? So there's a point involved, and I am citing it correctly, I think, but I am giving it credit. But yeah, your voice is, I'll tell you this, you can read chat GPT and know it's not my voice, right? What comes back in chat GPT, because I just kind of go all over the place sometimes. And I use words maybe incorrectly sometimes and in the wrong part of the sentence, but it does help. And but I think where you were initially going to is just if you're going to consult with a business, you just need to have an understanding about chat GPT, because they are more than likely going to have a question about it, because that is the hot topic right now. Not chat GPT, but artificial intelligence. How am I going to use artificial intelligence in my business, whether I'm in the mortgage servicing industry, whether I'm in the construction industry, whether I'm McDonald's, whether I'm a small business, a solo, insurance agency with just one business owner and one employee. How can I use artificial intelligence to improve my business, to improve customer experience? Those questions may come your way if you're going to do consulting, if you're going to be a solopreneur, and you need to understand it.
Agreed.
Okay, so we are coming to the end of our time here. Matt, do you want to add anything before I wrap it up?
I just think that kind of a takeaway for everybody is, as we're finishing, we finished the first quarter, you're almost halfway now through the second quarter. Get some outside perspective on your plans, your strategies. Use it as another kind of 360-degree view of what others are doing. And that's where your consultants and your contract talent, people like Colin and myself, can help you get some outside perspectives. What are some of the other practices and lessons that we're seeing other comparable companies take? So by all means, leverage people like us to help with that. And we can put our skin in the game. And not everything is at a fee structure, right? So we want to help you. And, growth in action. That's my tag, and that's what we're about. So thank you for that, Colin.
Growth in action. Hold on. Let me take this down. Yeah. So growth in action. That's great. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that wrap up there. So, one of the things I'd like to do is just kind of wrap up here at the end. It's fun talking to Matt because I've read all of his social media stuff, and I look at it and I see him at conferences, and we've been in the same industry I've been in it for 13 years now, and he's been around for a while too. So it's always fun to have these conversations. But talked about becoming a thought leader, right? We are not declaring ourselves thought leaders, but we're saying if you want to be a thought leader, if you want to at least be seen as someone who knows what's going on and who knows what he or she is talking about, we covered some of that area for you. We talked about consulting with C-level to maximize revenues, or how do you get in with C-level, or not even C-level, decision makers? How can you get in with decision makers? What do you need to do to make yourself ready to make your pitch, if you will? And then we also discussed artificial intelligence, because it just wouldn't be a current podcast if we're not talking about artificial intelligence. We talked about it in the context of how can you use artificial intelligence? How can a person use artificial intelligence to make themselves better, to make themselves present better, and to potentially help a client, or a friend for that matter, but a client, enhance their business, provide better customer experience, increase their revenues? How can you use artificial intelligence? And we've been using it ourselves. So we talked about some of our experiences. So I want to thank you, Matt, for joining me today. Thank you to anyone who's listening or watching this. Again, please feel free to like, subscribe, or share the podcast. If you're not on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/Harbourtime, which is where the channel is growing. It's relatively new right now, but I'm trying to grow the channel because I do want to provide this content to business owners, small business owners, potentially mid-sized business owners, or even C-level people who want to learn about different topics and different ways to grow. So that information is on @Harbourtime. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Matt. See you later.
Thank you, Colin.